Somewhere beneath the surface of the ocean right now, a cable thinner than a garden hose is carrying millions of phone calls, bank transfers, and video streams between continents. There are roughly 600 of these cables lying across the seafloor worldwide, spanning over 1,400,000 kilometers, and together they carry about 99% of all data that crosses an ocean. Not satellites, not the cloud in the way most people picture it. Wires. Sitting exposed on the bottom of the sea, largely undefended, and over the last 2 years, several of them have been cut. This is the story of the infrastructure the entire internet quietly depends on, and the very deniable, very effective campaign that seems to be testing exactly how easy it is to break. Start with what these cables actually are. Despite carrying the traffic of the modern world, most of a submarine cable is surprisingly small, a bundle of glass fibers about as thick as a garden hose, wrapped in steel armor and polyethylene near the coast, thinning out the deeper it goes. Light pulses race down those fibers at close to the speed of light. A single modern cable can carry enough bandwidth for tens of millions of people to stream video at the same time. Cutting one doesn't just slow things down for a region. In a bad case, it can cut a country off from the outside world almost entirely. These cables aren't new, and neither is the idea of targeting them. The first transatlantic cable was laid in 1858. It carried messages for about 3 weeks before failing completely. A working version followed in 1866. By the Cold War, undersea cables had become valuable enough to spy on directly. In the 1970s, the US Navy ran a program called Operation Ivy Bells. American submarines located a Soviet undersea communication cable in the Sea of Okhotsk and attached a listening pod that recorded everything passing through it, retrieved and swapped out by divers for years. The operation only ended after an NSA analyst named Ronald Pelton sold the secret to the KGB in 1980. The Soviets pulled the pod out of the water not long after. Even then, the message was clear. Whoever controls what's happening on the seafloor controls a kind of information nobody else can reach. Now fast forward to the last 3 years, and the pattern looks less like espionage and more like sabotage, although almost none of it can be definitively proven. In October 2023, a container ship linked to Hong Kong dragged its anchor across the seabed between Finland and Estonia, damaging a gas pipeline and a telecom cable. In November 2024, a Chinese-flagged bulk carrier called the Yipeng 3 is believed to have dragged its anchor for roughly 100 miles, severing 2 more cables, one connecting Finland to Germany, another connecting Sweden to Lithuania, within hours of each other. The ship sat in international waters for weeks while European navies monitored it, unable to force a boarding. A month later, an oil tanker called the Eagle S, flagged in the Cook Islands and believed to belong to Russia's sanctions-evading Shadow Fleet, dragged its anchor across the Gulf of Finland, damaging a power cable and 4 telecom cables at once. This time, Finland actually seized the ship. It kept happening. On December 31, 2025, a Finnish telecom company detected a break on the line between Helsinki and Tallinn. Authorities detained a vessel called the Fitberg. Days later, Latvian authorities boarded a separate ship, suspected of cutting a link to Lithuania. Halfway around the world, Taiwan has reported multiple cables near its Matsu Islands damaged by vessels with Chinese ties, treated by Taiwanese officials as pressure just below the threshold of open conflict. In the Red Sea, 3 major cables were severed in February 2024, initially blamed on Houthi rebels attacking shipping nearby, though the more likely explanation is that the anchor of a cargo ship they had already struck and sunk simply dragged across the cables on its way down. Sabotage, an accident tangled into the same event. And Egypt's telecom operator has accused an unnamed actor of a systematic sabotage campaign after a cable connecting to Syria was cut. Here's why almost none of this leads anywhere. These ships are routinely reflagged, owned through shell companies, and crewed by sailors with no visible connection to any government, proving that an anchor accidentally dragged for 100 miles in exactly the spot where a cable happens to run is nearly impossible in international waters. NATO has repeatedly declined to formally blame any country, even when suspicion points clearly toward Russia. It's the ideal weapon for a conflict nobody wants to admit is happening, deniable, cheap, and devastating if it ever happens at scale. And scale is the real fear. Only around 60 specialized cable repair ships exist for the entire planet's network, and a single repair can take weeks depending on weather and location. Most cables are also funneled through a handful of narrow choke points: the Baltic Sea, the Red Sea, the Luzon Strait between Taiwan and the Philippines, the English Channel, where a small number of well-placed cuts could isolate an entire region at once. Ireland's government was warned this year that a coordinated attack on the cables landing on its coast could cut the country off from the global internet almost entirely, because so many transatlantic cables happened to come ashore there. Governments are starting to respond. NATO launched a mission called Baltic Sentry in January 2025, adding frigates, patrol aircraft, and naval drones specifically to watch this stretch of sea. European countries are debating new legal powers to stop and inspect suspicious vessels, even outside their own waters. Tech giants like Google, Meta, and Microsoft, who now own or lease a growing share of these cables themselves, are quietly funding new, more redundant routes so that no single cut can isolate their traffic. But here's the part worth sitting with. We live in an age of satellites, 5G, and constellations like Starlink beaming internet down from orbit, and none of it comes close to replacing what these wires carry. Even now, the entire modern world runs through a few hundred cables lying exposed on the ocean floor, watched over by a handful of ships, in international waters where almost no one has to answer for what happens to them. The last 2 years have shown exactly how easy they are to reach. The only real question is what happens the day someone decides to cut more than a few at once. If you want the next hidden system explained, subscribe to The Hidden Wire, and I'll see you in the next video.